as well as experts on issues facing this great nation. Along the way, you'll discover the role that faith has played in our nation's history as well as in dealing with the issues we face right now. Join us Saturday afternoon at 2 Central here on American Family Radio.
We spent 14 months on this investigation looking for collusion. We didn't find any. We did find clear links between the Russians and the Hillary Clinton campaign, which nobody seems to care about.
I think that their goal was to create mayhem. They were also trying to hurt both sides. Russia was just generally trying to hurt everybody. Their goal was chaos.
I hired a framer to do a small addition. His wage at that time was $45 an hour. That was the minimum. Now, the average wage in Los Angeles for construction workers is less than $11 an hour.
You have to follow the law. It's just that simple. The federal law, you can't have states are not countries. They have their own jurisdiction under the 10th Amendment in our Constitution on certain matters.
Freedom prospers when religion is vibrant and the rule of law under God is acknowledged. An informed patriot is what we want.
Welcome to American Family Radio's Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio.
Muscular Christianity.
Where we relentlessly explore the intersection of truth and politics.
The trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so.
Now, here's your host, Brian Fisher.
Howdy, and welcome to this brand new edition of Focal Point on American Family Radio. Breaking news today from Washington. Apparently, Bob Mueller has subpoenaed the Trump Organization. First time he's gone after the Trump Organization, asking for documents relating to any interactions, business dealings with Russia. Now, ladies and gentlemen, you talk about a fishing expedition. There is no crime in doing business with Russia. Americans do business with Russia all the time. There's nothing illegal about that. So again, it's just a sign that Bob Mueller is just fishing around, flailing really now, it seems to me, to try to find something to hang around the neck of Donald Trump. Well, let's turn our attention to the Word of God. Don't forget, got an interview with Senator Chris McDaniel coming up in just about 8 minutes, talking about his declaration to run for the open seat for the United States Senate in the state of Mississippi. That's a decision that's getting a lot of national attention. That race is going to get a lot of national attention. We will talk to Senator McDaniel about that in just a few minutes. Now, one of the things we look at in the section in 2 Samuel that we're in today, 2 Samuel 18 and 19, and we see illustrated here again, David's greatest weakness was his inability to confront and discipline the people that were closest to him, even in his own family. Now, what happens at the beginning of chapter 18 is where our reading starts today, on into chapter 19, is that David is on the run from Absalom. Absalom launched a coup d'etat against David, came back to Jerusalem, reconciled with David, got 50 men and a chariot and a horse, 50 men to run in front of him, stood in front of the palace, greeted people as they came to get an audience with David. I'm sorry, Absalom would say, he can't see you. It's just too bad I'm not the king, that I'm not the judge. I would see that you're taken care of, but I'm just really sorry to tell you, we got nobody can take care of you. If only I was in charge. So he started ingratiating himself with the people. Finally, the day comes when he launches the coup against David from the city of Hebron, and David has to flee for his life. Flees up the Mount of Olives, down the other side of the Mount of Olives, all the way across the desert and across the Jordan River, winds up at a place called Mahanaim, a word that means two camps, and he settles there on the other side of the Jordan River. But David knew that Absalom was still on the hunt, and that he was going to have to neutralize the military threat from Absalom to be safe, so he divided up his troops into 3 divisions, and he sent them out to confront and defeat Absalom. He wanted to go with them into battle, but his troops talked him out of it. You are worth 10,000 of us, they said. You need to stay here. You'll be safer. So David accedes to their counsel. But he did give them one stern warning, and it was loud enough for everybody to hear. The king ordered, notice it was not a request, ordered his commanders, deal gently, literally softly, for my sake with the young man Absalom. That's David's son who had launched this coup d'etat against him and had killed one of his other sons, Amnon. So if you look at it from the commander's point of view, you know, the guys that David is sending into battle, and he's telling them, go easy on Absalom. He said, look, this is the guy that ran us out of town. This is the reason that we're on the run. This guy's the reason we're sleeping in tents on the ground, This guy's the reason we're living on beans and lentils because of this guy, and he wants us to go easy on him. So anyway, the climactic battle in this confrontation takes place in something called the Forest of Ephraim. It was a glorious day for David's troops. 20,000 of Absalom's soldiers died. Absalom's running now for his life. He runs into some of David's troops, turns to flee on his mule. His mule runs him under the thick branches of an oak tree, and his head gets stuck in the tree. Maybe his hair gets wrapped around some of the branches, and he can't move. He's stuck in the tree. The mule takes off, so he's left there hanging, as the Bible says, suspended between heaven and earth. So the report gets back to Joab that Absalom is hanging in a tree. And Joab exploded at the guy that brought him that news. Why did you not strike him there to the ground? And I would have given you some serious coin if you'd done that. And the guy says, no, I heard what David said about how he wanted us to go easy on Absalom. There's no way I'm killing the son of the king. You want to do it, knock yourself out, but I ain't going to do it. Absolutely no way. So Joab grabs 3 javelins. He goes to where Absalom is hanging in the oak tree, and he drove all 3 of those javelins into Absalom's heart while he's hanging from the tree. Then they cut him down. Joab's armor bearers come up, 10 of them, and they kill him after he was already dead. They abused his body after he was already dead. So Joab calls his army back. They all gather around. They find a big hole in the ground, and they dump Absalom's body in it. They bury him under a big pile of rocks, so there was no way that David could give him a decent burial. Now, Joab could do this, remember. He could just flout the direct command of the king because he had something on David. Remember, he's the only one that knew that David had ordered him to kill Uriah to cover his secret affair with Bathsheba. So he felt like he could get away with something like this, stick a thumb in David's eye. This is where David's sin and his weakness in dealing with his own family came back to haunt him. So David finds out that Absalom is dead, and he is inconsolable. Chapter 18, verse 33, David was deeply moved. He went up to the chamber over the gate and wept, and as he went, he said, "Oh, my son Absalom, my son Absalom, would I had died instead of you, O Absalom, my son, my son." Just inconsolable over Absalom's death. Now, because of David's response, visible there, people couldn't celebrate their great victory. They're ready to cut loose and party down because they no longer have to fear they're going to go back home. But everybody saw how hangdog David was, and it turned the whole day into a dark and gloomy day of mourning instead of celebration. So instead of riding into town at the head of a parade, the soldiers had to slink back into town like they were cowards who had run away from a fight. And David is still going around town crying with a loud voice, "Oh, my son Absalom, oh, Absalom, my son." Now this completely teed off Joab. He got right up in David's grill. He started shouting at him, "You ought to be ashamed of yourself. These people risked their lives for you while you stayed home. They saved your neck, and now you're making them feel like they ought to hang their heads in shame. What is wrong with you? Pull yourself together. Get out there and make a speech to your people about how grateful you are, because if you don't, you are going to lose them all." So David pulls things together and goes out and makes a speech to his people. Now again, just to summarize the lesson here, David's weakness nearly cost him everything. He failed to punish Absalom when he murdered David's own son Amnon, and that only happened because he never punished Amnon for raping Absalom's sister and one of David's own daughters, and because he never punished Joab for murdering Abner in cold blood, shedding the blood of war in a time of peace. Joab just became more cruel, more bloodthirsty and violent, and David was the one who paid the price. So lots of times our weakness shows up when we're faced with a tough decision. And we try to find the way to do this in the easiest way, try to find a way to avoid having to make that tough decision. But in the end, it will always catch up to us, and there may be a bitter price to pay. Well, let's take these things to prayer. Lord God, I pray for myself, I pray for my family, for the listening audience of Focal Point this day, for every man, woman, and child in this land, and for President Trump. We acknowledge that our love for people close to us can at times blind us to the need to respond firmly to their sin. We know we can watch things happen that should not happen and yet make no effort to intervene when we should. We freely acknowledge that we share this weakness with David. I pray that you will help us to learn how to lovingly and appropriately face people we love with their sin. We confess that it is difficult to do and easy to avoid. But we see in David's example that we can, in the end, reap a bitter fruit for our weakness. So we ask you to help us know when to speak Help us to know what to say. Teach us to speak the truth in love that we may help others deal with their sins. We confess, Lord, that there is within all of us the capacity to be vindictive and cruel like Joab was. I pray that instead we will have our consciences trained by constant use to distinguish good from evil and to choose the good. We pray for clear minds but soft hearts. In Jesus' name.
Isn't that a beautiful sound? That sonogram holds the sound of a baby's heartbeat. Hi, I'm Jim Stanley, General Manager for AFR. We're partnering with the Ministry of Preborn to help save babies' lives. Preborn partners with pregnancy centers throughout America in helping abortion-minded women choose life through ultrasound. By letting a mother hear her baby's heartbeat and see her baby in the womb, she will choose life 80% of the time. Ultrasound is a game changer. For $140, you can provide 5 ultrasounds. All gifts are tax deductible, and 100% of your gift goes to saving babies. You can save a baby's life right here in America by donating to Preborn. To donate, dial pound 250 and say keyword baby. That's pound 250 and say baby. Or donate securely at preborn.com. That's preborn.com. Your love can save a life.
For the one who sows to his own flesh will from the flesh reap corruption. My name is Abraham Hamilton III, and this is the Hamilton Corner. A woman was changing her clothes inside of a Target dressing room in the Woodlands, Texas, when she noticed the reflection of a cell phone in the mirror being held by what she described as a very tall man. She hollered and screamed, but was helpless to do anything. 2 nearby Target employees did absolutely nothing, presumably because of their store's policy. But a good Samaritan chased the man and got a clear picture of the pervert for the police. How many more women have to be victimized in your store before you get it, Target? How many?
Visit the Hamilton Corner on the podcast page at afr.net for more from Abraham Hamilton III, Public Policy Analyst for the American Family Association.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher on American Family Radio.
Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on Conservative Talk Radio. I am Brian Fisher, your congenial, convivial, and amiable host. And you are listening to the Focal Point Network. Speaking of congenial, convivial, and amiable, I'd like to welcome to our decision maker line State Senator Chris McDaniel from the state of Mississippi. It's a story that's gotten nationwide play, but Senator McDaniel was originally in a primary against the incumbent. He has now decided to run run for an open seat that will be vacated because Senator Thad Cochran is going to retire. There will be a caretaker appointed to fill that Senate seat until the special election in November. And to our knowledge, Senator McDaniel is the first one to throw his hat in the ring for that open seat. And Senator McDaniel, as I understand it, the race that you're in for the special election in November could be kind of crowded because it's one ballot. Everybody's name is on the same ballot, right? And the top 2 get to go to a playoff, I guess?
Absolutely. It's essentially what Louisiana does from time to time. So no party primaries. Everyone's just in one big primary, essentially, and the top 2 vote getters advance to a runoff. So I'm looking forward to campaigning and hopefully making that runoff.
Well, it's great to have you on the program, Senator McDaniel. He's been a frequent guest on Focal Point. A quick question to start off here. Some people have been critical of you because you switched horses in this election season. What is your response to them?
Well, there's a couple of responses. I think the first thing to understand is that this seat that we're running for now was the seat that I fought and bled for back in 2014. It's the seat that on runoff night we received the vote of 59% of the Republicans in this state. It's the seat that we feel like we were deprived of by some pretty vicious acts by the establishment. And Brian, we recognize that God has his plans and he has his own timing, and we're okay with that. All we're asking in this regard is that I be allowed to fulfill the remainder of that term. That's all I'm asking. Fulfill the remainder of the term that we feel like we won in 2014. And then if the people don't like me, if I don't fight for you, if I don't do exactly what I say I'm going to do, you can bring me home in 2020. So we look at this as a continuation almost of the fight in 2014. But also, the big reason, Mitch McConnell is down here in Mississippi with his people and his money, and he's trying to appoint our next U.S. Senator. He's trying to select our next U.S. Senator. He wants a yes man. He wants somebody that's going to do whatever he asks them to do. And that was really the primary motivation. I'm just tired of Washington in our business. I'm tired of Mitch McConnell in Mississippi's business. This was my way of striking back, and telling Mitch McConnell to mind his own business.
You know, Senator McDaniel, I saw a story this morning from Morning Consult. Their polling data indicated that Kim Kardashian is a more valuable endorsement than Mitch McConnell. So maybe you ought to go after the Kim Kardashian endorsement to deal with this threat from the left. But
that's great.
But Senator McDaniel, you're running in for this open seat. Do you anticipate? I mean, right now there are no declared opponents or no other declared candidates in this race, so you have no opponents at this point. But that's not probably going to last very long. I would anticipate that the swamp or the GOP establishment, Senator McDaniel, because of their distaste for you, it's particularly feral with Senator McConnell, that they may very well, like you say, appoint somebody to run against you, put a lot of money and a big names behind him to try to get them to unseat you. Is that what you anticipate?
I do. Mitch McConnell doesn't like me. The establishment doesn't like me. They know I'll push back. They know I'll fight. I'm not going to wait in line while our country has its religious liberties destroyed, while our Constitution is destroyed, while we run up these massive debts and deficits. I'm going to stand my ground, and they know that. So the same shenanigans they tried to pull against Donald Trump back in 2016, they're going to try to pull against me. And here's the problem with that, Brian. If they take that approach, they're going to create a split intra-party fight to see who gets to that runoff. If they're spending tens of millions of dollars against me and we're fighting back, that's going to hurt the Republicans' chances for taking that seat. Now's the time to combine resources, consolidate resources, and coalesce around one candidate, and that is the only candidate that's in the race right now, and that's me. And let's beat this Democrat. But if they get it, you know how they did in Alabama, Brian? They poured all that money in over there, and they sacrificed poor Mo Brooks. And then they destroyed the entire primary based on that initial expenditure that Mitch McConnell made to destroy Mo Brooks, which was a solid conservative that would have beaten the Democrat easily. So whenever D.C. comes to a state and they play these schemes and these games and they time these resignations just right to keep other people out, they play these silly little issues. Look, we have to see it for what it is, and we have to learn to push back. But if they want to do that, Brian, they could cost us a seat, and that's something we can't afford.
Well, you know, I'm observing what happened in Alabama, Senator McDaniel. I followed that very, very closely. I thought the way they treated Mo Brooks was shameful. I thought the way they treated Roy Moore, frankly, was shameful, because I did research and discovered there was no substance to these allegations that were made against Judge Moore about sexual molestation and all that kind of thing. But the thing that struck me, Senator McDaniel, is that they seem perfectly happy. I mean, the Republicans could have won that race, even with Roy Moore being crippled by these false allegations, if the GOP establishment had gotten behind their own guy. And I guess the thing that troubles me about the Republican Party leadership is it didn't seem to bother them at all that the Democrat that stands for everything opposite of what we fight for won that race. It didn't seem to bother them in the least.
They would rather have a Democrat in office than a conservative. They would rather have a Democrat there than a conservative that holds them accountable, because, look, a real conservative is going to stand there on the floor, and he's going to remind them of their promise to balance the budget. He's going to remind them of their promise to bring us term limits. He's going to remind them of their promises to protect religious liberty. And they've done none of that. And so they don't like being held accountable. So what they do, they defeat the conservative, and they move forward hoping they can just work with the Democrat. You see, that's part of the problem. We've been working with the Democrats far too long. We've compromised far too much. I don't want to work with the Democrats. I want to defeat the Democrats.
You know, and it strikes me, Senator McDaniel, looking at this, that it's almost like whatever you want to call it, whether you call it the swamp or whether you call it the GOP establishment or just the establishment in general, it seems like that's kind of a club, and belonging to that club means more to those that are in it than actually advancing the conservative cause. They want to keep people they don't like out of their little club, even if it costs them the advance of conservative principles.
Yes, sir. You're absolutely right, because to those men and women, it has nothing to do with principle. This is about pure power. It's about pure wealth and money. It's about the perks of office. It's about being able to give contracts to buddies and favors to friends and donors. That's what they want. They don't want to change Washington because Washington has made them rich. They don't want to change D.C. because D.C. has given them all these perks and powers. We have to change it. But you're exactly right. They abandoned the party principles. They've abandoned the conservative principles. Anything and everything. They'll do anything for power, and that's really disgusting.
Let me ask this question. One of the avenues that I think your opponent or opponents in this special election, assuming that there are some, and I think it's inevitable with the Mitch McConnell working behind the scenes, inevitable that we're going to get an establishment challenge to you, at least one.
Right.
How would you respond to the fact that your opponents are likely to use quotes from you, the things that you said about Donald Trump during the 2016 campaign when you were the chairman of Ted Cruz's campaign in Mississippi? How would you respond to them trying to use your own words against you?
Here's how I'll respond to it. They're not using my own words, Brian. What they've done, they've taken a sentence fragment out of a really long Facebook post, and by taking that fragment out of context, they they lie. They are liars about my record when it comes to Trump. Donald Trump was always my second choice because he, like Ted Cruz, was an agent of change. And if you look at the Facebook post they're using to criticize me, if you'll read the entire post, you'll see I wasn't referring to all Trump supporters. I was referring to 2 or 3 of them that came over to my page and called me a Democrat. Now, there's one thing that's clear in this world. If you think I'm a Democrat, you are delusional. If you think I'm a liberal, you are delusional. But 2 or 3 Trump supporters have come over and called me a Democrat. And so I responded that they're delusional. I didn't say all Trump supporters were delusional. I said those 3 or 4 people were. And that's not what the establishment does. They take that sentence fragment, and they blow it up, and they lie. And, Brian, hey, have you seen the commercial? It also says, I'm for Obamacare. If you've seen that, it says, I am for Obamacare. Brian, I was the state's lawyer. I filed a lawsuit with Bill Bryant to stop Obamacare. That's been the biggest issue of my campaign life, is stopping Obamacare. That ad is absolutely despicable. It's a lie from hell. That's all you can say about it.
Well, let's talk for a moment about about President Trump. He was your second choice in 2016 when Ted Cruz lost the primary. He became the GOP nominee. You got behind President Trump as the candidate, which many of us did. You know, for a lot of us, that when the choice got down to Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, that was kind of a no-brainer for most conservatives. But let me ask you, we're now just a little over a year into Donald Trump's presidency. What is your assessment of him so far as a president?
I like what he's trying to do. I like his fight. I like the ability of him pushing back against this wall he's up against. Now, consider this. Poor Donald Trump has to go into office every day. He has to fight against Congress. He has to fight against Mitch McConnell. He has to fight against all the administrative agencies. He has to fight against the lobbyists. Then he has to fight against the mainstream press. They all hate him and are trying to stop him because they're all part of the swamp. When you consider that, what he's accomplished so far is pretty amazing. Now, the scenario I envision is this. Could you imagine if he didn't have to compromise with Mitch McConnell, if he didn't have to compromise with lobbyists? Let's just say, for example, we sent him strong conservative fighters, and all of a sudden he could unleash his agenda. And a good example of that, Brian, as you know, the filibuster issue. You know, Trump asked the Senate to give him a 51-vote majority, not a 60-vote majority, to get bills passed. They didn't want to do it. They wanted to stick to the 60-vote majority, the filibuster issue, and that they have an excuse so they won't by not passing these bills. Look, bring it down to 51 votes and let's push the agenda through. Bring it down to 51, let's pass these bills and get it done. Our country is dying, and we got Mitch McConnell hiding behind an antiquated Senate rule. It's just time to change things.
Well, Senator McDaniel, when we come back after a short break here, and I appreciate you staying over for an additional segment,
yes, sir.
I want to recycle. I want to go back to that filibuster issue. I call it a fake-a-buster because it's not a genuine filibuster. But I want to explore that just for a few minutes because there are some constitutional issues involved, some political issues involved, just some kind of common sense policy issues involved in allowing that filibuster, that fake-a-buster, to remain in place. So I want to visit that with you for a little bit, and then I want to, you know, you'll be trying to convince people in Mississippi that you would be the guy to send back to Washington, D.C. to take Senator Cochran's place. I'd like to know, when you get back there, what are some of the priorities? If they send you back there, what are the things that are going to be important to you to work on as a senator? We will touch base with Senator Chris McDaniel when we come right back. Talking here with Senator Chris McDaniel, who was declared for the open seat in the election to replace Senator Thad Cochran from the state of Mississippi, who has announced his plans to retire. This is a race that's going to be closely watched by national media. We'll be right back with Senator McDaniel. Stay with us.
This is Dr. Richard Land, president of Southern Evangelical Seminary. Welcome to Bringing Every Thought Captive. The major reason that Bringing Every Thought Captive is important, and the station you're listening to our program on is important, is that a majority of the national media have distorted the news and have become abject propagandists for a radical progressivist agenda. We're going to tell you the truth here. Case in point, a video has gone viral of a Hispanic woman being arrested just the U.S. side of the Mexican border in California. And she is being led away by ICE agents. Her children are screaming, and the images look terrible. It looks as if ICE just wanted to go out and arrest people, and they dragged her off the street. Actually, there are hundreds of undocumented people walking around that city, and ICE could just do a sweep if they wanted to, but they didn't. They wanted to arrest her in particular because she is suspected of being involved in a human trafficking and smuggling ring, smuggling people illegally into the United States. They tried to contact her. She wouldn't respond. And when they sought to arrest her, she tried to flee. To show the video without that explanation and background is pure, blatant, distorted propaganda seeking to feed a false narrative of federal officials indiscriminately picking people up off the street and separating mothers and children. If this lady didn't want to be separated from her children, if she didn't want to be arrested, she shouldn't have been engaging in the illegal activity of smuggling people into the country illegally. Bringing Every Thought Captive and your radio station are committed to bringing you the real news, not fake news propaganda. This is Richard Land.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher
on American Family Radio.
Listen to the audio podcast or download today's program at afr.net. You can also read Brian Fisher's columns at afa.net.
afa.net.
Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point on American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name. Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio. Apparently, a pedestrian bridge at Florida International University has collapsed, and there are a number of people that are dead and a number of people that are injured. And Father, we ask you to look after those that are injured. We pray that you will get the medical attention. We pray that you would preserve life. We pray that you would hold responsible any who may have some culpability for this. We pray that your will and justice will be served. Amen. Our guest here on our decision maker line is Mississippi State Senator Chris McDaniel. As some of you are aware, Senator Thad Cochran, against whom Senator McDaniel ran in 2014, is going to retire soon, and the governor is going to appoint a caretaker to fill that spot until November. Then there will be an election in November that will carry the one who wins the election through the end of Senator Cochran's term in 2020. Senator McDaniel, the first one so far to throw his hat in the ring for that special election that will be held this November. So in Mississippi, quite unusual, we'll have two elections for United States Senate at the same time. The incumbent running for re-election and the other Senate race, Senator McDaniel running for this open seat. Senator McDaniel, we were talking right before the break about what I call the filibuster. It's a phony filibuster, but it requires 60 votes to break this filibuster, so you can't get anything through the United States Senate without the Republicans finding right now at least 9 Democrats to support the legislation. So explain to us, Lord Chris, how did we get this phony filibuster? Is there any basis for it? Does the law require it? Is it in the Constitution? What's the deal here? And what would it take to get rid of this thing so we can get some good legislation through?
Well, good point. Here's the thing. The law does not require it. That's the first thing. Understand, the founders actually placed in the Constitution a few what's called supermajority requirement issues. They did not have a supermajority requirement for any votes in the Senate. In fact, Madison and Hamilton and Jefferson would have argued that 51 is good enough. Now, what happened is, over the years, there was occasionally this time period where senators would occasionally filibuster, which means they would speak and have a limited ability to speak at the will and hold up legislation. That never lasted a long time because most of the time they couldn't stand for more than a few hours, but it's still a privilege exerted or extended to senators. Later, they switched the rule by basically allowing any one senator to filibuster a bill by objecting. And what that did, at that time, it would raise or increase the votes required to push the legislation to 60. Now, you think about that for a second. 51 votes is good enough in the House of Representatives. 51 votes is good in all state legislatures. It should be good in the U.S. Senate. Now, some people argue that we have to house this 51-vote filibuster or 60-vote filibuster because it slows down the process, right? That it's somehow an anti-democratic process. It slows it all down. It's really absurd. We've had this thing in effect for many, many years, and the one thing we've seen time and time again is more spending, more growth of government, more loss of civil liberties, more Obamacare. The bottom line is it doesn't work. It's never worked. Right now, it's an impediment to save in our country. We need to do away with that 60-vote requirement, bring it down to 51. And by the way, that can be done with a simple majority vote. Bring it down to 51, and let's save this country. Let's pass the legislation that we're supposed to be passing. But Mitch McConnell and his leadership team, they like the excuse. They like being able to hide under the 60-vote requirement because then nothing ever gets done. The status quo prevails. Consequently, he keeps his job and all his money and his perks.
Well, and Senator McDaniel, you can see the benefit of just requiring 51 votes because this is how the Republicans got the tax cuts through. They did it under the budget reconciliation deal, which only requires 51 votes. To my knowledge, Senator McDaniel, you can correct me if I'm wrong, that is the only conservative piece of legislation that's been enacted in virtually President Trump's entire administration because it only required 51 votes. And I guess my view is if we got rid of this phony filibuster, that's all that every conservative piece of legislation would take. The Republicans have 51 votes. If they stick together, they can pass any piece of conservative legislation they want, but if it stays at 60, I don't see any way they get any conservative legislation through the Senate. Am I wrong about that?
You're exactly right. They're going to hide behind that 60-vote requirement. They're going to come home and campaign. They're going to tell you they're really conservative, but they just don't quite have the votes. And again, that's deceptive. They do have the votes. They can change that rule at any point in time, get that vote down to 51, and then pass whatever legislation they desire, including a full repeal of Obamacare. But they won't do it because they like hiding behind the excuses. They like hiding behind Mitch McConnell.
Now, I sense, Senator McDaniel, that's going to be sort of at the core of your campaign message, trying to unblock that logjam back in Washington, D.C. Am I correct about that?
Absolutely. There's no question about it. Our country is suffering. We are losing the greatest country in the history of the world. Our debt is out of control. We can't seem to get any handle on spending, and yet we're scared of changing an antiquated rule. I mean, give me a break. We have to use every weapon at our disposal to push back against the liberal threat. Every weapon we can bring to bear, we have to use to push back against liberalism in both parties. So, yeah, man, that's a big part of the issue, no doubt.
Now, if the voters in Mississippi send you back to Washington, D.C., I teased this question a little bit earlier, what would be, I don't know how to put it, however you want to construct it and respond to it, what would be the three major priorities you would have? What would be the three biggest things that you would like to see the Senate do when you get back to Washington, D.C. to be a part of? What would that be? Obviously, we've got to repeal Obamacare. Not part of it, all of it. Every word, every comma, every and, every or has to be repealed. Number two, we've got to balance the budget. It's a no-brainer. The greatest threat to our national security, the greatest threat to my children's survival in a country like ours is this national debt we've incurred. It has to be balanced. Number three, we got to have term limits. We have got to change who we send to Washington. One way to do it is to elect new blood. The other way to do it is systemically force those men and women out of their seats to bring new blood up there. And lastly, we have to do everything in our power to restore religious liberty and our original Constitution. And what that means is, by an interpretation standpoint, our Constitution was designed to be a document of limited powers. Our central government must respect its role, and that role is a very small role.
Anything not in Article 1, Section 8 of our federal Constitution belongs to the states and the people respectively. So we have to begin structural reform at that level to force the powers back to the people, back to the states where local governments can make these decisions and experiment on the best policy for American citizens. So a lot of work to do, but it's time to get started. It's time to fight.
Let me ask you a couple of questions about current issues that the United States Senate, in fact, all of Congress and the President, the administration is dealing with. The Trump administration, Attorney General Sessions have threatened to withhold funding from sanctuary cities. These are cities that are actually breaking federal law because they are refusing, despite the dictates of federal law, they are refusing to cooperate with immigration officials to remove convicted illegal aliens from American shores. They have a responsibility, a legal responsibility, to report to ICE, to Immigration Customs Enforcement, if they have in their custody an illegal alien who has committed a crime. They're responsible to hold them. ICE agents are supposed to come, take possession of them. But in these sanctuary cities, these sanctuary states now, they refuse to cooperate. So they turn these criminal illegal aliens loose back into society. And Senator Sessions, or Attorney General Sessions, Donald Trump recommending that sanctuary cities be punished by withholding of the grants that otherwise they might be eligible for. Would you support that as a senator?
Yeah, I would take it a step further. First of all, you have to outlaw sanctuary cities. Secondly, you defund sanctuary cities, every dime. And third, if that doesn't do the trick, we can arrest the mayor and put him in jail for violating the law. We are a nation of laws, and they cannot turn a blind eye to it and pretend it doesn't exist. The laws have to be enforced. And so to the extent that these mayors are abusing the law, and Brian, you know the federal government does have powers over immigration. The Constitution gives them naturalization power. Since they're abusing those laws, they need to pay a price. So absolutely, I would agree with that.
Well, you know, the Constitution makes it really clear, I think it's in Article 1, Section 9, that after the year 1808, the issue of who gets to come into our country, as migration of persons is a term, is entirely the province of Congress. Up to 1808, the states could decide for themselves who comes into the country. But after 1808, that was a congressional responsibility. So this is clearly a constitutional prerogative that that the administration is acting on when they say we can't have sanctuary cities.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
Now, let me ask you another question. Senator Sessions used to be, but Attorney General Sessions has been a controversial figure. A lot of people, a lot of conservatives feeling like he's not doing enough. They want him to get a backbone. They want him to get a spine. A lot of conversation about Donald Trump being on the verge of replacing him. What's your assessment of Senator Sessions, and do you think maybe it is time for a new Attorney General, or do you think Senator Sessions is just methodical and he just needs a little more time to get the job done?
Well, you know, that's a good question. Personally, though, it's time for action. I think he's been far too passive. I sincerely do, and I'm not suggesting he's not a good person. I think he probably is a good person. But there's no question in my mind that Hillary Clinton has gotten away with things that most Americans could not get away with. I would just suggest that. And I think that there's so many times that we conservatives drag our feet when it comes to prosecutorial duties. We drag our feet when it comes to indictments because we're afraid of upsetting the apple cart or upsetting the system. I want to see aggression on the side of the Attorney General. I'm not suggesting that he violates the law. I'm not suggesting that he takes the law into his own hands. I'm suggesting that he enforce the law as written and do it in a way that's fair to the American people. In other words, get the politics out of it. Just do your job and bring justice to the American people. And so far, he hasn't done that. So is it because he's maybe just methodical, as you say? Perhaps, but it's time for him to act. It's time to do his job.
Okay, got a two-part question, completely different topics, Chris, but we're down to the last minute here. Gina Haspel's been nominated to be the CIA director. The left is going to beat her up for being a supporter of torture. Do you believe, Senator McDaniel, that waterboarding itself is torture, number one? And how would you vote? If you were in the Senate, would you vote for or against her nomination? And secondly, do you support or oppose tariffs? Hit me.
Okay, three questions. Okay, the first one, going to the issue of waterboarding. I got in trouble a few years ago when I was on the radio, probably 15 years ago, and I made the claim, which is accurate, by the way, that waterboarding had been successful in interrogating some of these terrorist suspects. And so, listen, I think you have to turn those instruments over to the CIA. You let them do whatever they need to do to save American lives. If that means waterboarding a terrorist, then yes, I'm going to leave that to their discretion. Number two, to the tariff issue, let me tell you how I see that. I think Donald Trump is actually being very, very smart trying to use an elevated tariff on steel and aluminum to perhaps negotiate with these other countries. If that's the case, then it's a genius move. I think ultimately what we should be looking at is taking regulations and rules off of these American companies so they will stay in our country and not relocate.
Senator McDaniel, I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm flat out of time. Thanks for being with us. We'll talk to you again soon.
All of chapter 4 through 19 has to do with what God is going to do when he pours out his wrath upon the earth. The church won't be here. The church will be in heaven. How do we know that? We just looked in through the door and the church is up there already.
Join Dr. David Jeremiah for his series Escape the Coming Night next time on Turning Point.
5:30 a.m. and 7 p.m. Central on American Family Radio.
Share the message that Jesus changes lives. One way to proclaim this amazing news is by wearing and sharing the colorful American Family Association's He Lives Easter buttons. If you're a business owner or pastor, order several to give away. We encourage you to wear a button yourself and share the rest with others so that they too can proclaim this life-changing message. The button fits in your pocket and it's easy to share. They're sold in packs of 10, so get your AFA Easter buttons at afastore.net. That's afastore.net.
Well, September weather in Washington, D.C. is generally very, very nice. Hello, everyone. I'm Tim Wildman, president of American Family Association and American Family Radio. Our June tour sold out. We've only got seats left for our September Spiritual Heritage Tour of Washington, D.C. and George Washington's Mount Vernon. Now, for all the information on this trip, just go to the website spiritualheritagetours.com, spiritualheritagetours.com. We're also going to Williamsburg, Jamestown, and Yorktown. So if you want to do that tour as well, all the information again is available at spiritualheritagetours.com. Those trips, Williamsburg and Washington, are back to back. We're going to have a wonderful time with listeners from all over the country to American Family Radio on our Spiritual Heritage Tour in September. Again, for all the information, go to our website, spiritualheritagetours.com.
American Family Radio. You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher.
Hi, and welcome back to the last segment of the first hour here on this edition of Focal Point on American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name. If you'd like to call the program, I'd love to get your reactions to what you heard from State Senator Chris McDaniel running for an open seat for the United States Senate here in Mississippi. Going to get a lot of national attention as it progresses. Give us a call at 888-589-8840, 888-589-8840. Give me your reactions, what you like, what you maybe didn't like, whatever. Give us a call. Give you your reactions to Senator Chris McDaniel. The number to call is 888-589-8840. Got just a programming note to give you a heads up. Coming at 2:30 today, we are going to make room for a special from American Family Radio. In God We Trust, a series of programs we're doing under that theme, In God We Trust, Defending Christianity. This will be a 30-minute special featuring Frank Turek, Dr. Frank Turek, one of the best apologists in the country. He will be presenting powerful and entertaining evidence for Christianity and its role in American history. So you want to stay tuned for that. That'll be at 2:30 on right here on Focal Point American Family Radio. Number again to call if you want to join our program is 888-589-8840. While we're on the topic of enhanced interrogation, Rob, let's grab clip number R2. This is Brian Kilmeade talking with a guest who is an expert on the issue of waterboarding and enhanced interrogation. This ties into my conversation with Senator McDaniel about this. Let's listen to Brian Kilmeade and this expert on the topic.
So when she's asked that question directly, did you torture people in Thailand, in black sites in Eastern Europe? How do you answer?
I have no idea how she's going to answer that. I can tell you how I'd answer it. I would say no.
Because?
Because that's not true. It's as simple as that. It's just not true.
Right.
You know, the CIA did not have a torture program. The sites are still classified, so I'm not going to opine on that. I can't confirm or deny any of that sort of stuff, and I can't confirm or deny that she was part of that program. But I can tell you that if I was asked that question that you asked me, I would say no. Full stop, period.
And a lot of people, like you, I read your book, are proud that they were able to take the worst of the worst and stop the next attack.
Absolutely. She's a hero. She should be the next director of the CIA, and America will be safer with her behind the wheel.
Okay, strong endorsement there for Gina Haspel. And I'm in agreement with those. Waterboarding is not torture. I think the Bush administration made a mistake when they took it off the table. It proved to be effective. It's not torture. Making somebody think they're drowning is not the same thing as drowning somebody. Those are two different things, completely different. One is psychological, the other is torture. You're not drowning anybody. You're just making them think that they're drowning, and that's how you get them to cooperate. And that's the purpose of waterboarding. It's not to get information out of people. It's to get cooperation from them. It's a technique they use when they had a jihadist, a Muslim that wants to blow us up and cut our heads off, way to get him to cooperate. Way to get him to be convinced to share what he knows. So that's what it's about. It's not about extracting people and getting information out of them. It's getting compliance so they will answer the questions that they are asked. All right, let's go to Daryl in Sherwood, Arkansas, 888-589-8840, 888-589-8840. Daryl, what's on your mind?
Yes, sir. One quick comment about the senator you just had on.
Yes, sir.
You asked him about sanctuary. You asked him about sanctuary cities, and he gave 3 bullet points. One was outlaw the sanctuary city, 2 was cut off funding, and 3 was make arrest. And then your next question after that was concerning Jeff Sessions, and to which he replied during his long answer there that we in America were slow to prosecutorial processes. You know, we were slow to do that. But that's exactly the same thing he had just done. He had just done that himself. He put the reverse order. They should make the arrest first of these mayors that are breaking the law, not go through the process, the lengthy process of outlawing him and then cutting off funding. I mean, it's funny that he dinged, to me it's ironic that he dinged Jeff Sessions for the very same thing that he had just expressed.
Mm-hmm. I see what you're saying.
I found some irony in that.
Yeah, so you'd like to see us be a lot more aggressive. Now, are you advocating that we be more aggressive with these mayors? And
I'm advocating we follow the law, and if someone breaks the law, they need to be arrested.
Mm-hmm.
Whether they're in a position of politician, whether they're Hillary Clinton, whether they're a guy who took pictures on the submarine, whatever the case is, you know, you can't have one set of laws for one group of people and another. If the mayor is breaking the law, they need to be arrested. They don't need to wait for more procedures and things to be passed.
All right, Daryl, listen, I appreciate the call. Thank you for that. You know, the only question there might be out there is do we need to establish a specific law? Maybe Congress needs to pass a law that criminalizes that behavior on the part of mayors. I'd support that entirely. It would become a fresh law rooted in the Constitution with a clear standard, and if a mayor did what these mayors are doing, it would be a violation. It would be a clear felony, and it would result in arrest. All right, Kim in Hebron, Mississippi. Welcome, Kim. What's on your mind? Talk to me.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up with Senator McDaniel. My question would be to him, what makes him the best candidate versus what the GOP might select against him, like they propped up Thad Cochran for the last time, the last go-round. And what also, although McDaniels is great, as in my choice, I would vote for him for sure. But what makes this guy in Pennsylvania, Lamb, maybe he's a dino, maybe he's a Democrat in name only, maybe he's more Republican than we think.
Yeah. Well, it'll be interesting to see. You know, it's interesting to me that a lot of these people that are liberals, when they run for office, they run as conservatives. And that's how Conor Lamb sold himself. I am pro-gun. I am pro-life. I am anti-Pelosi. I like a lot of what Trump has done, and he won the election. I mean, it's close, 600 votes. But I think the proof is going to be in the pudding with him, Kim, whether when he gets back there, how is he going to vote? Is he going to vote according to the promises or the positions he took on the campaign trail? My guess is probably not. My guess is true colors are going to show, and we're going to see that he's pretty much a genuine, honest-to-goodness Democratic liberal. All right, Kim, a good call. Thank you for that. Let's go to Pete in South Carolina. Pete on waterboarding. Go ahead.
Hey, Brian. Good to talk to you, and thanks for taking the call. Just coming about waterboarding,
And I remember right after 9/11, I was in Connecticut. That's where I was living at the time, born in Manhattan. And the New York Times, Frank Rich and Maureen Dowd at the time were the two of the biggest, in that case, writers over there at the Times. And Frank Rich kind of laid down the gauntlet in March of 2012. He's like, I'm sorry, 2002. And he said, you know, basically, it's not a question of if, it's a question of when are we going to get hit again. It was the general feeling of the time that another 9/11 was going to happen imminently, any time. And there was no way that Bush was going to keep us safe for another 8 years. And there's no way, according to the liberals, no way. And yet, we didn't have another major terrorist attack. He did it. And as soon as Obama was elected president, we didn't have another 9/11, but we had many, many terrorists. And Obama, couldn't get the Muslims in here fast enough. Unvetted. Crazy. So, waterboarding, whatever works to keep this country safe, do it.
All right, Pete, I appreciate that. And, you know, waterboarding was successful. They did extract very valuable information out of uncooperative witnesses or subjects like Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. That guy folded like a cheap Bedouin tent in a stiff desert breeze when he got waterboarded, and he gave us a lot of information that helped to stop additional jihadist attacks on American soil. All right, let's go to Keith in Pleasantville, Pennsylvania. Keith, what's on your mind? Talk to me.
Hi, Brian. Great show.
Thank you.
Hey, two quick questions. Why do you think we've seen thousands and thousands of hours of coverage on both Parkland and Sandy Hook, and we have never seen a descriptive rendition of how these individuals got in the school and the route they took once they got in there? If the doors are locked, they don't get in. And no one is talking about this. And the students yesterday, I feel they only did this similar to the NFL players who took a knee to get media attention during school hours. Why didn't they organize that on the weekend? It didn't take away from class time.
Well, that's a good point. And there are several school districts. In fact, I've got a story in the stack here somewhere. Several school districts have gone on record saying, look, they're going to get punished. If they skip school to participate in this walkout, they're supposed to be in class learning. You know, a school is not a political activism center. It is a center for learning. You're not here to learn. You're going to get penalized. So there are school districts that are being quite firm about that. You know, and I'm with them on that deal. Well, you know, one thing, Keith, when you look at I saw a map of the shooter in Florida, of the school and how he got in, and you're right. He came in through an east entrance to that school building that wasn't guarded and it wasn't locked. I mean, there was nothing. He walked right into that school with a gun. So there wasn't anything. He didn't have to pick a lock. Just walks up to the door, opens it up, and all of a sudden he's inside the building with just a lot of innocent, defenseless students. I think you make a good point there, Keith. We need to do something to make our schools hard targets. Thanks, Keith. Appreciate it. Go to Brenda, Tremont, Mississippi. Welcome. What's on your mind?
Yes, I was listening to your conversation with Chris McDaniel, and we supported him the last time. And what I was concerned with was that the Democrats get to vote in our primary and how we could go about getting that changed.
Yeah. Well, I don't know what can be done about that. I'm in favor of a closed primary. My home state of Idaho, it took a considerable amount of work to get a closed primary. But now in Idaho, in order to vote in a Republican primary, you've got to be a member of the Republican Party. You can't have any crossover voting in a closed primary state. So we'll see what Mississippi does about this. It obviously was a real hazard to Chris McDaniel getting a fair shot in 2014 because there were bunches of Democrats that crossed party lines and voted for Senator Cochran in the primary, then crossed back over and voted for the Democrat in November, which is against the law. You're not allowed to do that under Mississippi law, but there's no way to really identify who did that. You know, if you vote for somebody in the primary, you're not allowed to vote for somebody different in the general election. That's specifically to prevent that kind of crossover, but there's no way really to police that. So about the only way to do that is make it a specifically closed primary state. All right, Brenda, thank you for the call. Appreciate that. Well, that's the end of hour number 1. We'll be right back after the news. Don't go anywhere. We'll give you more information. Remember, special coming up at 2:30. Stay tuned. We'll see you right back here after the news.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio.
Announcing 3 new episodes of Ryan DeFrades' Secret Agent. These animated half-hour episodes will entertain children.
That's right!
Ryan DeFrades is a secret agent with a whole lot to learn, and he insists on working alone until he's paired with a very unlikely partner.
Mommy!
From American Family Studios, episodes 4, 5, and 6 are available now at afastore.net.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio, a ministry of the American Family Association.
American Family News on the Hour. I'm Chad Groening. More sanctions against Russia being announced. Fox's John Decker reports from the White House.
The latest U.S. sanctions targeting 19 Russian individuals and 5 entities concern its meddling in the 2016 presidential election and other malicious cyber attacks. Among the 5 entities sanctioned by the Treasury Department is the Internet Research Agency, which was indicted by a grand jury last month as part of Special Counsel Robert Mueller's investigation into possible collusion between the Trump campaign and Russian officials. In a statement, Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin said the targeted sanctions are part of a broader effort to address the ongoing nefarious cyber attacks emanating from Russia. At the White House, John Decker, Fox News.
Should the lead by Democrat Connor Lamb in a heavily Republican district in Pennsylvania trigger alarm bells for other Republicans and the White House in the upcoming midterm elections? Not according to Special Counselor to the President Kellyanne Conway, who said the administration recognizes that history is never kind to the party in power during the midterms. But she says President Trump's involvement in the special Pennsylvania House race caused such a close outcome.
All the polling that was being quoted showed a 5 or 6 point lead by Connor Lamb. The president obviously narrowed that gap. I would say a message to the well-paid consultants in this town to stop criticizing publicly, particularly Republican nominees. I don't know why they do that.
Conway also said the White House is prepared for a possible blue wave in the 2018 midterm elections. However, she also believes that Republicans should run on the tax cuts in an attempt to stem any momentum by Democrats. The Navy says 2 aviators were killed when their F-18 Super Hornet jet crashed off the coast of Key West, Florida late yesterday afternoon. Fox's Lucas Tomlinson has more from the Pentagon.
A source close to the investigation tells Fox News the F-18 Super Hornet was flying on only one engine when it lost the other at low altitude, a mile from the runway. The pilot and weapons systems officer were killed when the jet crashed in the water during a training flight off Key West at 4:30 yesterday afternoon. President Trump tweeted his condolences overnight. The jet belonged to the Black Lion Squadron, which deployed last year aboard the USS George H.W. Bush to strike ISIS in Iraq and Syria. Earlier this month, a jet from the same squadron flew over the outdoor NHL hockey game between the Capitals and Maple Leafs in Annapolis, Maryland. In November, the head of Naval Aviation said only half his fleet of Super Hornets can fly. At the Pentagon, Lucas Tomlinson, Fox News.
It was short and to the point, but Joy Behar's public apology was enough for one organization to stop its protest. Here's AFN's Steve Jordahl.
You likely heard back in February that The View host Joy Behar criticized the Christian faith after a former White House staffer found it odd that Vice President Mike Pence heard from Jesus.
It's one thing to talk to Jesus. It's another thing when Jesus talks to you.
Exactly.
That's called mental illness, if I'm not correct. I'm hearing voices.
Christian groups, including Media Research Center, took exception to the disparaging remarks. Their political director, Christian Roby, says they started a campaign that got ABC's attention.
Our folks were really angry about this, and it didn't let up, and we did this for close to a month. At the end of the day, we conducted over 42,000 phone calls to ABC and the advertisers.
Now, they were not calling for Behar to be fired. They did not want a boycott of the show or its advertisers. They simply wanted a public apology. Last week, ABC reported that Behar had personally apologized to the vice president. Pence told Fox News he accepted that apology, but that it should also be given to Christians in the audience. On Monday, they got it.
I think Vice President Pence is right. I was raised to respect everyone's religious faith, and I fell short of that. I sincerely apologize for what I said.
Their goal being reached, MRC has called off the campaign. But Roby has a warning for the next Hollywood celebrity that wants to belittle the faith of millions of Americans.
Folks like Joy Behar, people in media, people in Hollywood, need to realize that the days of treating Christians as second-class citizens is over.
I'm Steve Jordahl.
And that is American Family News on the Hour. I'm Chad Groening.
This is Steve Conover inviting you to listen to the Friends of Israel Today each week on this station. Here's our host and Bible teacher, Chris Katulka.
Hey everybody, the Friends of Israel Today is a unique radio show that teaches biblical truth for changing times. We do this through Q&A, timely interviews, dramatic readings from the life of Holocaust survivor Zvi Kalisher, and of course, Bible teaching.
To learn more, visit foiradio.org.
Join us for Friends of Israel Today, Sunday morning at 11:30 Central on American Family Radio.
We spent 14 months on this investigation looking for collusion. We didn't find any. We did find clear links between the Russians and the Hillary Clinton campaign, which nobody seems to care about.
I think that their goal was to create mayhem. They were also trying to hurt both sides. Russia was just generally trying to hurt everybody. Their goal was chaos.
I hired a framer to do a small addition. His wage at that time was $45 an hour. That was the minimum. Now, the average wage in Los Angeles for construction workers is less than $11 an hour.
You have to follow the law. It's just that simple. The federal law, you can't have states are not countries. They have their own jurisdiction under the 10th Amendment in our Constitution on certain matters.
Freedom prospers when religion is vibrant and the rule of law under God is acknowledged. An informed patriot is what we want.
Welcome to American Family Radio's Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio.
Muscular Christianity.
Where we relentlessly explore the intersection of truth and politics.
The trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so.
Now, here's your host, Brian Fisher.
Hi, and welcome back to the second hour of Focal Point on American Family Radio. Great to have you in the conversation. Brian Fisher is my name. Focal Point, the program, Network American Family Radio. Apparently, the footbridge that collapsed at Florida International University had only been installed on Saturday. I don't think it was open yet for pedestrian traffic, but they spent $14.2 million building that thing, and it collapsed. Landed on a bunch of vehicles, a number of people dead, so we'll stay with that story. Obviously, a much more to come in terms of investigations and all that kind of thing. Here's a story that'll probably grind your gears. It certainly grinds mine. Headline from Fox News, undocumented immigrant, which being translated means illegal alien, which being translated means somebody from another country who has no right even to be in the United States, has been appointed to a statewide post in California. Appointed by Kevin De Leon, he's a state senator in California, wants to be their governor. The Senate Rules Committee has appointed this woman, Lizbeth Mateo, a Mexican-born attorney and immigrant rights activist who came to the U.S. with her parents at age 14, will serve on a committee that advises the California Student Aid Commission. So now illegal aliens that are in the country illegally, breaking the law just by being here, are now helping to run the California state government. So you got crooks running the California state government. My response to that is, so what is new? What do you think has been happening for the last 40 years? All right, let's get to some sound bites here. I want to complete some of our information on the whole Russian investigation. No, let's do this one. Let's go to clip number 1, because this is another soundbite on Gina Haspel. This is the woman. This is a Rand Paul soundbite. He is fiercely opposed to this woman. I like Rand Paul a lot. He's a man of conviction, a man of principle. I think he's just plain wrong on this particular issue because he believes waterboarding is torture. We looked at that very, very carefully. Administration did. The Department of Justice did. This wasn't something that was done under the cover of darkness in our administration. It was looked at very carefully. It was scrutinized. Department of Justice looked at that thing backwards and forwards, upside down, decided that it was permissible. And remember, the people that were waterboarded had no protections under the Geneva Conventions. You can't waterboard an American soldier because we have protections under the Geneva Conventions, because we fight in uniform, we have a chain of command, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There are certain rules that you have to follow in order to even to be eligible to be a part of the Geneva Convention. And it's an agreement between various international states that we won't treat, this is how we're going to treat each other's POWs. Well, they have none of those protections under the Geneva Convention because they do not fight in uniform. They don't have a clearly established chain of command and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, here is Rand Paul, other side of the issue. Remember, we heard from that expert saying America will be safe with her at the wheel. Here's what Rand Paul has to say, clip 1.
On Ms. Haspel, when she was present during waterboarding, she was gleeful at the waterboarding and was sort of, gloating at the fact that the guy's acting as he's struggling to breathe and drowning in fluid. And so this is not what America stands for. Torture is not what America's about. I have family members in the armed service. I don't want to send a message to the world that torture is fine, because our young men and women can be captured at some point in time too. And if the whole world thinks that America tortures prisoners, they'll do exactly the same to ours. And so this is a woman who's the poster child for what went wrong with waterboarding after 9/11, and she should never, ever be at the head of the CIA. She should never, ever be advanced to any kind of position in the CIA. I think she's absolutely disqualified.
All right, well, there's Rand Paul. She's absolutely disqualified. She is not going to get his vote. Now, it'll be interesting to see, because it only requires 51 votes now for confirmation to a post where you got to get Senate confirmation. And that's thanks to what Harry Reid did and thanks to what the Republicans did. So to get her confirmed only takes 51 votes. So if all the Republicans hold together, she gets confirmed. But Rand Paul's already made it clear, I'm not voting for this woman. So now they're down to 50. Now, they only got 51 senators to start with. They can only lose one. And if they only lose one, then Mike Pence can come in and cast the tie-breaking vote. So right now it looks like the Republicans, this nomination is hanging by one thin thread. The other 50 senators all have got to hang together, and I'm willing to bet that Lisa Murkowski, I'm willing to bet that Susan Collins and Maine are going to go completely off reservation on this. They're going to agree with Rand Paul. This is torture. He used that word 4 times in that 145-second soundbite. So we'll see how all of that goes. The reality is it's a non-issue, because George Bush took it off the table in 2006. We haven't waterboarded anybody since 2006. This is a non-issue. Gina Haspel hasn't waterboarded anybody since 2006. No indication that they're going to resume that. They could, but again, and they could easily in my mind, because it's not torture. So anyway, it's kind of irrelevant at this point in American history, because she's not going to be involved in that. Even if she could be, they're not going to be doing it anymore. Now let's pick up a couple of sound bites on immigration. Let's go to Marco Rubio, clip number 2. Marco Rubio is finding a little bit of a spine when it comes to the immigration issue. That's good to see. Let's listen.
States need to follow federal law. I don't know what's so complicated about it. I don't even know why that's controversial. If you don't agree with the federal law, that's why you have 2 senators, and in California, dozens of members of Congress come up here and change the law, or try to change the law, but you have to follow the law. It's just that simple. The federal law, you can't have, states are not countries. They have their own jurisdiction under the 10th Amendment in our Constitution on certain matters, but on something like national security and immigration, that is a federal topic, and they got to follow federal law. It's as simple as that.
So simple as that, they got to follow federal law. And again, as we talked about in talking with State Senator Chris McDaniel, this is a matter that the Constitution places squarely in the hands of Congress. Article 1, Section 8, the issue of naturalization is clearly in the hands of Congress. One of their powers is to establish an uniform rule of naturalization. That is, who gets to be a citizen and who doesn't. But if you go to Article 1, Section 9, a lot of people don't get this far, but it deals, beginning of Section 9, with the migration or importation of persons. As any of the states now existing shall think proper to admit, shall not be prohibited by the Congress prior to the year 1808. You could put a tax or a duty on them, but you couldn't prevent them from coming into the country. So the Constitution makes it clear that from 1789 until 1808, states could decide who gets to come into the country and who doesn't. After that, that's up to Congress and Congress alone. So clearly Congress has unilateral authority to decide immigration issues according to the Constitution itself. States do not. 10th Amendment or not. So Marco Rubio on the right side of this issue. Now, when we come back, I'm going to play a lengthy soundbite from a whistleblower. This is a guy that's been in the trenches kind of following what's happening with illegal immigration and the impact that it is having on wages. You know, and we've talked about the fact that it can't help but cut wages. Now we've got proof that it's harming wages, and this whistleblower will give us the straight scoop on all of that. We'll touch on that when we come back. Got a couple of clips we're going to hit that deal with a Russian probe. Again, the breaking news today, Mueller investigating the Trump organization for business ties with Russia. There is no crime in that. It's nothing illegal about that. We got people all over the place doing business with Russia. Not a criminal thing. But again, the way the Democrats have approached this, if you have any contact with Russia, that's automatically suspect. Focal Point American Family Radio. Be right back.
You shall not murder. Hello, everyone. I'm Tim Wildman, president of American Family Association and American Family Radio. This is the 6th commandment of the 10 commandments. You shall not murder. We are asking schools all over America to put this on their marquees, put this on their signs out in front of their school for 1 week to remind America's students that innocent life is precious. Help us spread the word about this campaign to your friends and family. Please go to our website, afa.net, and sign our open letter to America's schools. We need to proclaim this message, you shall not murder, across the land. Why? Because gun control alone will not solve matters of the heart. We need our young people to understand that murder is a violation of God's law, and also it's a violation of the laws all across this land. So help us. Go to afa.net and spread the word.
Hey, my name's Brant. You ever make a change and then wonder, why didn't I do this a long time ago? That's what's happening for thousands of people with regard to their health care. They're joining MediShare, and then they're wondering, why didn't I already do this? For most members, it costs less than half what they were paying for their old health plan. There's a huge provider network, too. You can customize your plan, and this is awesome. MediShare members can go online with a doctor 24/7. So if you need a prescription for the flu or something, it's so convenient for you and your family. So yeah, this is one of those why did I wait on this things. And if you don't love your current health plan, you're not stuck with it. You can join MediShare anytime. By the way, to give you an idea, the typical savings for a family, about $500 a month. It just makes so much sense. Check it out. They're super easy to talk to. Call 855-PSALM-23. That's 855-PSALM-23. 855-PSALM-23.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher on American Family Radio.
Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point American Family Radio. One more soundbite on the immigration issue I want to play for you. And by the way, Pakistan, you know what Pakistan's doing? They have a problem with terrorists coming across their border with Afghanistan. They've got a 1,500-mile border. Ours with Mexico was 2,000 miles. They've got a 1,500-mile border with Afghanistan. You know what they're doing to stop terrorists from coming across the Pakistani border from Afghanistan? They are building a fence. And their description is this is the simplest solution in the history of the world. This is from Breitbart. Pakistan is building a border wall with Afghanistan after decades of unsuccessfully controlling the flow of terrorists and criminals who quietly slip back and forth across the porous 1,500-mile border. The wall is not concrete, but consists of a comprehensive border system that includes 2 layers of 12 feet tall barbed wire fencing, surveillance cameras, solar lights, an intrusion detection system, and hundreds of manned forts and thousands of observation posts. It is scheduled to be completed by the end of 2019. According to Pakistan's military's top spokesman, it has, quote, phenomenally reduced the unchecked border crossings. Hey, if it'll work in Pakistan, it's going to work here.
And Pakistan's not an extremely wealthy nation anyways, so, I mean, if they can do it.
Yeah. And they've not been real cooperative with us either. But you know, the reality is Pakistan's not really our friend over there, but they don't want Muslim terrorists in their country any more than we do. All right, well, let's turn our attention. I want to close the loop. We got a few minutes left before, well, let me play the clip number 3. I was setting this up and then I didn't play it. This guy is a whistleblower. We don't know his name, but he spent a considerable amount of time kind of in the illegal alien immigrant community, in the work community, And it's a lengthy soundbite, but a lot of information here that I think you will appreciate. Another illustration why we need a border security wall, why we need to stop the flow of illegal aliens across our southern border now, as in ASAP. Let's listen.
If I hired a framer to do a small addition, his wage at that time was $45 an hour. That was the minimum for a good framing contractor, a good carpenter. For a helper, it was about $25 an hour. For a master or somebody who could basically run a complete job, was about $45 an hour at that time. Most of the jobs, even for small jobs, they were bid out, but that was the going wage for the plumber. That's what he would have to figure into for his cost, and his helpers typically got $25 an hour. Now the average wage in Los Angeles for construction workers is less than $11 an hour. They can't go lower than minimum wage, and then much of that, if they're not being paid by the hour at less than $11 an hour, they're getting paid per piece of plywood that's installed, per piece of drywall that's installed. Now the subcontractor can circumvent paying them as an hourly wage, and they are now being paid by 1099, which means that no taxes are being taken out. Well, part of it was due to the market, but then there's the other part that really pulled it down, and that was the influx of just a flood of undocumented workers. Unfortunately, what I have found is that it's overwhelmingly being built by illegal immigrants that have basically taken over every trade. All the trades finally went to the illegal immigrants.
So, and I want to thank Rob for going the extra mile on that. That took a lot of work because he had about an hour-long source, take 50 minutes, had to sift through that and get those sound bites that I wanted. But, this is a whistleblower saying, look, 1988, when I started into this thing, the going wage for a framing contractor or a good carpenter was $45 an hour. That was in 1988. Now you're lucky if you can get $11 an hour for doing the same thing. Why? Because of illegal aliens. And they have taken over, he says, every trade because they are willing to work for wages that Americans can't, because they've got families to feed, they've got families to support. They're not going to be able to do it on $11 an hour. Now, you can support a family as an American worker on $45 an hour. You might even be able to do it on $25 an hour. That would be a decent wage for a lot of folks. But that's gone because of criminals, illegal aliens. I call them criminals because they're breaking the law. That's the definition of a criminal, somebody who is breaking the law. They're breaking the law just by being here, and they're running American workers out of the trades. All the construction in California, says virtually all of it is being carried out by illegal aliens who have taken over virtually every trade. I mean, whether it's framing, whether it's drywall, whether it's plumbing, whether it's concrete, taken over virtually all of the trades. Now, let's wedge in a few sound bites for the end of the program on the Russia investigation. Remember the House Intelligence Committee 2 days ago, they issued their report, said we find no evidence, zero, zip, nada, zilch, evidence of any kind of collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia. And Jim Jordan says there's some other information that we are picking up here from the House Intel report. Here's what he had to say.
Well, I think we learned two key things from the Republicans on the Intelligence Committee, their report. The first one is it told us something we already know, namely there was no coordination between the Trump campaign and Russia to influence the election. The second thing they told us is something that we suspected, now they've confirmed, which is that Clapper actually was the guy leaking information, specifically leaking information, I believe, from that January 6th meeting where they briefed President Trump, then President-elect Trump, on the dossier, and someone at CNN got information, we think it was Mr. Clapper who gave it to him, and then a few days later BuzzFeed prints the entire dossier. So those were, in my mind, were the two key takeaways. No coordination between the Trump campaign and Russia, and Mr. Clapper was leaking information. Here's one of the top intelligence people in the government at the time leaking information to the press.
So James Clapper, he's the DNI, Director of National Intelligence. He's the guy that's leaking classified information to the press. James Clapper. This guy, when he gets on TV, he's always pompous. He's always arrogant. He's always dismissive. He's Mr. Know-Everything. And here he's the one that was involved in leaking these classified documents to the media to stir up a lot of dust, get it in the air. Devin Nunes, clip 4. Remember, he's the chairman of this committee. And here's what he has to say about, the time that they spent compiling this intelligence report. I mean, they spent hundreds of hours. They interviewed 73 witnesses. They reviewed something like 20,000 documents. Enormously time-consuming enterprise. And Nunes says, look, for us and for the FBI, there's a better use for our time and energy. Clip 4.
We need to get our FBI and our intelligence agencies working on real problems and get them away from what they're doing now, which is, it looks like spinning in circles. We spent 14 months on this investigation looking for collusion. We didn't find any. We interviewed many dozens of witnesses, many people right around the president, almost nearly everybody who was involved in the campaign. All of them have testified under oath that they had no contacts with the Russians. If you look at the one example of which was, I think, bad judgment, which is where they met with a Russian lawyer, but it had to do with Russian adoptions. But on the other hand, we did find clear links between the Russians and the Hillary Clinton campaign, which nobody seems to care about.
So Devin Nunes says the only links, the clear links that we could establish, were between Hillary Clinton and the Russians. Remember, she collaborated with them in getting this dossier and sent people over to Russia to funded the whole thing, the whole dossier, which included sending this Christopher Steele over to Russia to talk to people in Russia. So the only collusion that's emerged so far, Hillary Clinton and her campaign, and nobody's interested, as Devin Nunes says, in pursuing that. Now, poor Adam Schiff, he's kind of hanging in there. It's a little tough for him because he's got nothing. And he proves it in this little soundbite. It's only 19 seconds, but he says something that is very, very revealing here, where Adam Schiff admits that he's got nothing. Listen to this.
We should get to the bottom of this, and we'll continue pressing them. And in the days to come, Rachel, we intend to demonstrate all of the investigative leads that need to be followed, the witnesses that should have been called, the documents that should have been produced, in the hope that it will guide journalists, it will guide our colleagues in the Senate, and may even be of assistance to Bob Mueller.
Okay, so here's Adam Schiff. After a year plus of working on this, House Intelligence Committee, I think, started this research or started these set of hearings 5 days after Trump was inaugurated, if I remember correctly. And now listen to what he says. Adam Schiff is saying we are going to demonstrate all, he's telling us to Rachel Maddow, we're going to demonstrate all of the investigative leads. The word leads is the operative word here from Adam Schiff, because a lead is not the same thing as evidence or data. A lead is something that might take you to evidence or take you to data, but it isn't the same thing. So Adam Schiff is admitting that we have absolutely nothing but leads. That's all we've got. After a year and 2 months, all we've got are leads. We have no idea if they're actually going to go anywhere. Last clip of the day, clip number 6, Representative Tom Rooney talking to Aaron Burnett on CNN. Let's listen.
I think that there was efforts to try to hurt Hillary and help Trump, but I think that there was also the opposite too. I think that their goal was to create mayhem so that any candidate they won, and they did believe that Hillary was going to win, was to have that person bloodied and weakened so that they would be able to use that in the future against us. I think that there's absolutely evidence to show, though, that they were trying to help Trump at some points, but also they were also trying to hurt our side as well. There's evidence of both sides. Now, the effect of that may have been that it helped him at the polls. The effect of what they did during the propaganda and the Facebook ads and everything else was that it may have netted him some results. But they were also trying to hurt both sides during this entire process. We have a lot of evidence of that as well. So I think both things are true. I think that certainly he was helped by the Russian propaganda, but I think Russia was just generally trying to hurt everybody. I mean, I certainly think there's evidence of that. I don't know that necessarily there was a full-fledged campaign to do everything that they could to help elect Donald Trump. I think that their goal was chaos. But to say that we've seen or read evidence to say we got to get Donald Trump in there, I don't know that that's true. I mean, I certainly think that they did not like Hillary, but I also know that they kept very good evidence against Hillary in their back pocket and didn't release it.
Whoa. So there's dirt out there on Hillary Clinton that the Russians did not use. Wonder when that's going to see the light of day. And you notice what Tom Rooney says. He's considered kind of a renegade, but he says, look, the goal of the Russians here wasn't to help Trump get elected or Hillary. Their goal was to create mayhem and chaos. Those were his words. They didn't care who won. Putin said, there's no difference between the people that get elected. We just wanted to make chaos and create mayhem. Well, that's it for today. We'll see you back here tomorrow. Stay tuned for the special.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio, a ministry of the American Family Association.
Hey, my name's Brant. You ever make a change and then wonder, why didn't I do this a long time ago? That's what's happening for thousands of people with regard to their health care. They're joining MediShare, and then they're wondering, why didn't I already do this? For most members, it costs less than half what they were paying for their old health plan. There's a huge provider network, too. You can customize your plan, and this is awesome. MediShare members can go online with a doctor 24/7. So if you need a prescription for the flu or something, it's so convenient for you and your family. So yeah, this is one of those why did I wait on this things. And if you don't love your current health plan, you're not stuck with it. You can join